A first rate fade out. That was awesome. I don't know if you guys, he picked the right spot in the song. We're a minute late, but I think it was worth it. So thank you, Cole. All right. Let's
And he
get
picked a
started.
better song than last week.
Yeah. Also, he's also the good with the bad. He's also at fault for this image. So I apologize to everybody. It's a little early for all that. Okay, let's get going, Cole. All right. So hey, we talked about this last week, and we'll probably be talking about this a lot moving forward. Last year we helped 89 families, and I think that's a really fantastic thing. And we maybe could do better this year if we can. So we're gonna do a holiday gift card drive. Found that the gift cards are more effective and easier for the families to use than giving a specific gift. It also allows like for families to have some pride and go purchase things for their children and whatnot. So
So somebody I know had an idea that maybe we should get gift cards and then they can just leave cash if they need to.
Oh, that's
they
not a
don't
bad
want to
idea.
take the time
Yeah,
to go
yeah.
out and shop for
We can
gift
make it
cards.
easy, or you guys would like how we could buy a bunch of gift cards and you give $5 or whatever.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, because
go
they have
towards it.
like there's gift cards. There's like a gift card wall, I think, at Albertsons or Safeway, and you can pick like whatever you want. Maybe we should just go get some as a company, and if people just want to donate $20, we can have a $20 gift card and throw it into the
I think that's a good idea. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and I think we should have a goal of at least 100. I mean,
That'd be cool.
so close.
Mhm.
We should be able to.
So in that scenario, who would we tell? Like, do we just send an email to Robbie and say, can you charge the credit card I have on file for whatever?
That's a great idea too. Look at this all happening right here, right now. That's fantastic. That's a great idea as
That's
well.
a great idea too.
Yeah. Yeah. Or Target or
Yeah,
mhm,
yeah, good idea.
someplace useful.
Maybe we'll do 20s. We'll get 20s and 25s or something. So
10s,
people can-
20s, whatever we need. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or maybe we just apply it to a fund.
yeah, yeah. We could collectively, if somebody just contributed $5, we could, collectively
Mhm.
put those together to get a 20.
Probably.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
That'd be
Exactly.
good.
20. Well, I mean, the minimum, I would think that would be the minimum
Yeah.
to make a difference to a family. It's,
Yeah.
$5 is just going to not even get them a coffee anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Cool. All right. Tomorrow, immediately following the group coaching, we've changed this around a little bit. We're going to do a C class and analysis of CMAs, different products that you can use. We get this asked a lot, like what CMA should I use? We provide cloud CMA, and I think it's fantastic, but it's always good to see what else is out there. So come on in. Ryan Jacobson is be presenting this. It should be great. Register yourself if you'd like to come.
yeah, this comes up in our training throughout the year. People wonder like who's using what CMA to do their business, right? This is your chance going into next year to knock one thing off your list, because remember, if the rates go down in this low inventory market, it is going to be crazy competitive for listings.
It feels
And
like
so you need to get every listing when you have an appointment to get a listing. And that means developing one of the most powerful CMA and marketing presentations out there.
Yeah.
So it starts with a CMA that people will follow and having conversation points around a CMA to be effective. So this is a great time to do one important thing that you need for next year.
And let's hold on to that thought.
Okay.
For just a moment. That's good. Two thoughts in there that I want to hold on to.
Okay.
Okay, cool. And this is a great class. Your own Dwight Schwab, seller financing in a high interest rate world. Be there, be square. I don't know. He does. Who's been through this class? Who thinks they've learned it all? Right. Okay. Dwight does such a good job of explaining why this is a benefit to your clients. He explains it in a way that you can use to explain to your clients. And I just think come and hear what he has to say. I've been talking about this to anybody who will listen. This is a great class. You have to come.
Yeah, and I would say my perspective on this is how I convinced people to do it.
Mhm.
So my perspective is here's how you do these deals. I'm not going to dive into the legal aspects of a trust deed versus a contract, which you would get from an attorney. I'm not going to do that. This is how you convince people to do it so you can actually make some money.
Mhm.
And so I think that's where it differs from
Yeah.
every other presentation that's starting to emerge right now. And again, I did this to the Portland Top 100. I did it to the Central Oregon Top 100 a few weeks ago. The responses have been great. And interestingly enough, when I did it to the top 100 in Central Oregon, my first question was, how many people have actually now done one of these? And more than half that, like
Wow.
50 people raised their hand. And I thought, wow, they're in it already trying to make sales. Because I'm probably because heavy vacation rooms
Right.
over there, right?
Yeah.
So those are even worse rates.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think the room's going to be full. I'm getting questions from outside our company and inviting
Yeah.
people. So I think this room's going to be full.
And what I think again is really unique about this is just like it shows the benefit to the client. Like I have a feeling like those half people who did them, they just did it out of necessity to get the deal done. And the seller's going to wake up one day and be like, oh, wait, this is actually a better deal for me than I thought. When they look at their finances, Dwight's going to get into that and explain why it's good now. So it's a great class. I opened my eyes to something that I seen was like I would always look at seller financing as like, oh, that's a horrible idea until I heard Dwight's class. So there you go. He changed my mind.
Positive tool.
Yep. Vision board party. This is always a blast, guys. It's on Thursday from 3 to 5. We'll have supplies and snacks and probably some wine. But it's a good time to kind of come in and get refocused on what your big why is and put it on a board so that you can remain motivated throughout the year. Okay.
Yep.
And instead of a meeting next week, we are going to feed you. So we're going to do a gratitude breakfast from 10 to 11 or so until it fades out. Heading into Thanksgiving, we're just like also thankful to be in business with you guys. So we wanted to show it with Elephant's Breakfast. It's gonna be fantastic. I hope you guys all come and more. Those of you on Zoom, I can't feed you through Zoom. We've tried.
That's right.
We can't do it. 2024 ALC clinic is Thursday, November 30th from 9 to 4:30. If you're interested in joining the 2024 ALC, please attend this meeting. If you qualified to be part of the ALC, you've received an email. I think that's about it.
Right.
All right. My man Brett Branch closed first listing yesterday. Brett has a year's worth experience in just one transaction. This thing was just never ending, like five separate accepted offers, right? All different. And the one that finally closed was like somebody who just like was good, Brett. Yeah, I don't want to tell you.
The last one was
Like all cash, closed in like 2 weeks. They offered to pay. They were in the second position. They offered to buy the first position out of the transaction. And this first position people ended up terminating and not getting the money, right? Which is funny. They should have taken the $5,000. Anyways,
Yeah.
A very interesting transaction, and he learned a lot from it. Brad's got a bright future, so.
And did you learn a lot from Mark?
Of course he did.
think about buying out of first position. Like I asked Mark about it, asked you about it, like you never seen.
Never heard of that before.
Like I'm hitting new stuff. It was like
Yeah,
uncharted territory.
yeah. That was kind of a fun thought to figure out, like who had what there. Yeah, that's kind of fun. Yeah, so congratulations. And we've got our top groups. So
Okay.
yep, Cricket at the top, Rita right on her heels, Linda, Bradley King, Nikos. Those are some illustrious people. And then Daryl's 125 million, Fox Group's at 92, 140 with their expansion groups, Waldman and James, Team Schwab.
Wow, we slipped. Waldman and James are up by one part of a deal.
Yep, and the Clark Group. So again, those are
There's Peter's here.
Peter's.
Oh, there he is. Yeah, they're slipping bad.
It's all residential.
Yeah, where's Cameron? He left the
Oh, he
room. He's out closing it. Cameron's out closing another deal right now.
Commercial volume residential.
No, we're never going to separate that as long as it moves us up. No, Cameron actually is in the other room. They're listening to a commercial.
Yeah,
training.
I thought he's out closing another deal.
Yeah.
All right, next slide. I saw this yesterday on the email from PMAR, and I just think like every opportunity we get to talk about buyer broker agreements or buyer representation agreements, we're gonna promote it. So this is a course brought on by PMAR, and Tony was in here last week. He's the president of PMAR, for those who remember. And he's doing a great job, and he's really focused on bringing you information that you need to navigate these changes, whatever they might be. And like, the buyer representation agreement is getting a lot of discussion lately, and this lady has used it as a high level. And so it's just a little half-hour online webinar. I'd encourage you all to attend it. We're all learning about how to use these documents. We've all had them. We've all known what they are. We've never had the leverage to use them. And I think we're not only going to need to have that leverage, we're going to have to use them moving forward. So like figuring out, learning what conversations to have, how to have the conversation, how to promote your value is more important than it's ever been. And so I think if you have an opportunity to learn from somebody who uses these documents, then you need to take it.
I think as you dig into this buyer broker agreement, learning how to use the buyer broker agreement is relatively easy to get people to sign up for it. I think you'll find that. We did it a little bit several years ago, and then we faded away from it and didn't seem to have any issues. The greater issue is, how are you going to use it when they're interested in a property that is not offering a commission rate that you support for your business? Like, you might have a minimum rate that you would want to get on a house as a buyer's agent. So how do you have that conversation? That's the difficult part of this change.
And
It's not a conflict though of like, doing the best representation for your own client. Like, okay, yeah, like the buyer's compensation isn't what you want, but your job is also to represent your client to the best of your
Well,
ability. So
Catherine, your parents should work for free. They're
Yeah.
attorneys. Right.
0.2 and, if it's between like 2.7 or
Right.
2.5.
Okay, so that's a great point, right? So like, as business people, we're always going to be making computations in our head, like what is good for my pocketbook now versus what's good for my pocketbook in the future, right? So what's good now versus what's good in the future, right? So today, it's better to get that 2.5 and get as much as you can out of it, right? But if you bleed your client dry and they don't want to do business with you again, was it better to take the 2? I don't know. Is there something between? I hope so. We're going to find out, right?
We're going to talk, we'll have more conversations about that.
Yeah. No, there's a lot coming forward. There's a lot that's going to happen moving forward, right? We just need to keep talking about it, figure it out. Because you bring up a really good point, right?
Yeah.
You bring up a really good point. All right. Mike. My man.
Big
Mike.
changes in the market today. I think.
Yes,
That's what I'm reading. Are you seeing it?
yes, sir. Good morning. We do have a 0.25% better than yesterday on rate, which has been fantastic. Inflation numbers came in slightly better than they thought. So there was a 15% chance they were going to do a rate hike in December. That is now 0, which is a good number. What else do we have? They talk about rate decreases starting as well in May of next year.
Wow.
As opposed to June, which is great news as well.
Mhm.
That's pretty
Pretty good. So the more we see these improvements, hopefully, or not improvements, I guess like the CPI came in and it was underperforming, which is good, right? It was lower than they expected it to be.
Right.
If it comes in lower again than they expected to be, we might even get, they may say May, maybe April, right? So all of this news is going to keep us moving, hopefully, towards
The right direction.
the right direction.
Yeah.
So it's great. Cool.
The 2-1 buy down. I know we talk about this all the time. I think it's going to be our best friend for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
I've printed off a seller concession sheet for you guys, so you can have that. It gives you an idea of what the max for each down payment is, what percentage is allowed to be used for seller credit. If it is an investment property, it cannot be used for the 2-1 buy down, because you can only do 2% on an investment property for conventional. So the 2-1 buy down is not even possible, unfortunately, with that product. But yeah, I've got that printed off. I'll leave it up front here.
Awesome.
If you guys want that.
Sweet.
So when rates come down by a quarter, what's the best rate you're seeing then for, 800 credit score?
Yeah. So today we're at on a 30-year fixed rate about 7.75. So yesterday was literally 8.
So 2-1 of getting a 5.75.
5.75 for the first year.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
That's like, that is like $100,000 in buying power.
Yeah, it's massive.
Question, What would you think is a better incentive to offer buyer the 2-1 buy down or money towards their closing costs? You know, because it's money now.
Definitely the buy down.
Well,
I mean, our thought process, rates are gonna drop.
we've done both. for listing,
Yeah.
And like, we just had no buyers, granted, it's Baxter busy street, so people are like, no.
Yeah.
You know,
The great thing is we've been seeing, you know, we're getting a 2-1 buy down paid for and some closing costs as well, depending on how, you know, how long the house has been on the market, which
Mhm.
has been really nice.
Yeah.
Take advantage of both.
And if you're going to do, if your clients are gonna offer a buy down of some sort, or they're offering closing costs, you literally have to scream from the mountaintops to make it fine, to land on the right target, right? Because people are looking for, probably who can afford the house with a buy down might be looking for a house at a different price. So you've got to get really creative with the way you're promoting it. And like, you've got to like, put it on your sign, put it on your flyer, do social media posts, whatever you can do to promote the value of that buy down. You got to do it. Otherwise, it's just like, hey, we're doing a buy down, but if nobody knows about it, what good is it? So you got to really promote it. This is where your value as a marketer comes in, right? This is what you earn your money for.
Yeah, I've seen a couple listings now that are literally staying, you know, 2-1 buy down available, paid by seller.
Yeah. The first sentence of the
Yeah.
remarks, right? Yeah.
Right. So that everybody's.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Capital letters.
Yeah. In capital letters, right? Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks, Mike.
Very
Appreciate
good. Thanks, guys.
I do have something to add to that. Remember that the Fed is in control of the short rate, the very shortest terms that they charge to banks. The long-term market, the bond market, is set by investor expectations. So if investors start to believe, the moment they start to believe that rates, that the economy is going to slow down and be there for a while, they will start buying the 30-year treasuries, and that will drive 30-year rates down, no matter what the Fed does with short-term rates. So the Fed could sit tight on short-term rates, and investors think the economy is slowing. They want to lock in the long-term bonds. They'll want them. There'll be a flood to buying that in, and that's what will drive the rates down. So if you think about what's happening in the market right now, just as an idea of what could happen next year, the Fed is selling nearly $1 trillion, like $860 billion worth of bonds, just to pay their bills right now. They are the elephant in the room of the treasury market, trying to keep the government open. And so they're competing with all the investors of the world that would normally just invest, and they're sucking all those people out of the market, which is driving the rates up. When that's done, and we have November, December, January numbers, there is a possibility that rates could be in the 6s, buy downs being 4, 4.5, 5.5, 6.5 by January. So in your world of planning your business for next year, what will happen if the inventory stays low and the rates drop from 8.5 last, like 10 days ago, to 6.5 over 4 months? What will happen to the market? What will happen to your business if you have listings? They will sell, right? So you should be marketing everything you can do to get every possible listing on the market by January. That would be my business choice right now. If I was trying to sell at a high level, is I would come up with marketing material. This is why it's a great time to sell. Don't wait. So that's my 2 cents.
I agree. It's always good to build a listing-based business. It's never bad. It's always the best time. All right. Before we jump into this, I do want to talk a little bit about updates on the NAR lawsuit. Dr. Tony Kelly and Crane are both at the NAR conference right now, and they've been sitting in and listening to some of the NAR lawyers talk, and they feel like they've got a really great case for appeal. But I think at the end of the day, the changes in the way we do business are happening, and I think that the buyer broker agreement is the thing of the future. I think you're all going to be using it, or you're going to be using it.
And non-mandated,
It's not mandated.
non-mandated co-op
Yeah.
pricing.
Yeah. No, it's no.
So it'll be separated. You can be sure no matter what happens.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a conversation with the sellers about what they'll pay you, and you'll have a conversation with them, very clear, distinct conversation about what they want to offer, if anything, to a co-oping broker, which we haven't been doing, but Washington is already moving in that direction. We will be following them.
Yeah, NAR has been preaching this, and I think it is actually really good. They're preaching when it comes to the BAC, transparency, clarity, and choice, right? So if you're going on listing appointments, you need to start having discussions about what they're going to offer, if they're going to offer a BAC, because it's their choice, right? So Dwight and I have been giving a lot of thought to this. We've been talking about it a lot, and we kind of thought maybe the best practice would be to, we use comps to come up with a price on our listings. We should probably use those same comps, the actives, the pendings, the solds, to come up with a BAC, or at least to advise our clients on a BAC. If they're looking, you say, well, what should I offer? Well, this is the range that's being offered now. Where do you want to land this range?
Yeah. I mean, that is the simplest one. I have been using it for probably 15 or 20 years.
Right.
And so if you looked at solds and you printed solds out and you looked at their commissions and you said, this is what the solds were at. Here's what your competition is at. Here's what the most immediate competition is at. What do you want to do? And then it's their choice. And yeah.
Then combine that with days on the market for the sold listings, so you can fit them. 1% on the market for 120 days or never sold.
Yeah, if there's a relationship in the data, this is exactly what you would look for is there a relationship between the commissions and the days on the market? Because if there is, that is super powerful conversation point to have with owners.
Or is there a relation between the commission amount and the sale fails? So like in the late 90s, I got into real estate in 1998, and I was just telling Dwight this, the first transaction I ever closed offered a bonus to me for selling the house, right? To entice us to coming and purchasing a house. That was back before Zillow, Realtor.com, Homes.com, all of these big websites. I think things have changed a little bit. I think that the way we do, I don't call clients. Let me back up here. How many of you call clients and say, hey, do you want to go see this listing?
Yeah.
Do you beat them most of the time though? Do they beat you to the punch?
Yeah.
They're asking you to go see the house?
Yeah.
50-50? That's great. You're awesome. You're very on top of it. Good job. So if someone calls you and says they want to go see a house, are you going to say, no, I don't get paid enough on that? Maybe not. I don't know. We're not there yet, right?
But you have no contract.
And you have no,
Or whether
if you don't have
make
no
that
contract.
distinction.
Yes, you don't have a contract. But I believe that the reason why sellers should be offering BACs this day isn't necessarily to bring the buyer to the transaction, because I think the buyer is going to come no matter what, but it's to keep the agent from finding a crack in the transaction that allows them to take them to the house next door that's offering a better BAC. That's why I think you want to look and see. This is why my seller, if I was working with a seller, this is why I would say, hey, let's look at these numbers, because we want to make sure our buyer's agent is vested in closing this transaction and not trying to take them to the house that pays them more. That to me is, I don't know if that's a code of ethics violation or not. I have no idea, but I feel like that's a conversation you need to be having with your client.
Do you think that there's another way to,
Yeah.
not alone,
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a little bit last week. So you could build it in like we do closing costs. So instead of the buyer bringing 12,000 to the table for closing for the loan costs, they're bringing 12,000 to the table to pay you. Right?
And the seller pays closing.
And the
costs.
seller pays the closing costs, right?
Sure.
Right.
That's an easy way.
It could be that the industry catches up and lenders start saying, okay, well, we're going to allow a certain commission amount to be paid out, to be wrapped into the loan. It could be the seller's willing just to pay it straight up because they realize their house isn't selling and they want you to, it's going to be probably looked at as every other term in a sale agreement, right? You're looking at price, you're looking at closing costs. The seller could also be looking at the commission that you are requesting as a buyer's agent, right? It's all the same money. It's all going to come out in the wash, but it's in the presentation. That's how things are going to change and how we present this. Okay.
In terms of showing the seller the comparison of the BACs, we have to be careful not to cherry pick the comparisons in terms of transparency.
Well, that's why I would use the comps that you're using in your to show value, right? Like to show the value, not your value, but to show the value of the house. Like I would use those same comps.
I guess the point was that, you find 12 and 2 of them you don't want to show. You need to show them all.
Yeah, no, exactly. But I get that, yeah. But you need to use all the data though to produce I mean, I guess assuming we're all gonna do a good job of using comps to put a price on a property, right? And we're not gonna cherry pick, we're not gonna use that comp because it's got a low BAC, even though the house sold in a period of time that might be favorable, Mark.
It's not likely to have the choice of 40 different comps for a listing right now.
It doesn't feel like that at all,
They
right?
only have three. Three out of
That's,
three.
that's. the
Yeah,
issue.
Terry. Yeah.
They negotiate out
Hmm.
the buyers.
Mhm.
So what the, back to that listing.
I don't think so.
I can tell you that I've had commissions that were lower for many years, but builders might say, I'm only paying this,
Mhm.
right? And so, maybe we offer 2% or 2.25. And I would get calls regularly, especially from certain realtors in the community that would say, will your seller pay 2.75 or 3% if I can sell this? Will you ask them? And I would have to ask my owner, would you pay, if they bring a buyer and they sell it, would you pay more? And the sellers would say normally, well, if that means that I could close it and have a deal in 30 days, yeah, I'll do it. Right? Because they have interest carry considerations and all kinds of things. So we're going to have to communicate a lot more for buyers, just like you do with sellers. Like, if your client is interested in a house, you call to see what the situation is. Call the listing agent to see what the situation is on the house. Hopefully you do,
Mhm.
because it helps you structure the right offer. Well, it's going to be the same with buyers. If the reported transact or BAC is lower than what your contract is with the buyer, then you would call and to say, hey, is there room there?
Yeah. So like this, imagine this phone call. So, seller agent calls you up, say, hey, how'd the showing go? Oh, they really like the house. Oh, that's great. Are they going to write an offer? Well, there's one thing holding them up. So we have a buyer broker agreement for 3%. You're offering 2%. I'm not sure how we're going to bridge that gap. That's how the conversation starts. It's that simple. It's just like any other term we talk about. Well, they love the house. It's just priced a little too high. Or will they offer closing costs, right? We do this all the time. We're just going to be throwing in another component. It's not that big of a deal.
Like, as someone with a listing agent and someone with a listing who's been on the market for a while, someone calls, take 2%, 2.7
Mhm.
BAC, and I lower mine, I would do that. all day.
You'd take the haircut just to get the deal done, right? Well, but you probably go to your seller first, right? Yeah.
What you're going to have to do to make this work is you're going to have to talk in terms of the dollars, right? People get very confused about 2.7 versus 2.5 versus 2.0 versus
Yeah,
1.0. They don't even know what that is. What
Mhm.
my experience has been, when I actually say, would you pay $4,300 more if I can close this in 30 days to a buyer's agent? They would say 4,300. Well, yeah, because that means we can move, we can get the house we want, we can lock our rate in, we can, all the reasons that they want to.
Mhm.
So I will just advise you that you have to translate it to the actual dollars for people to actually understand it.
That's great. That's good advice.
Is that in detail? Is this fine?
Well, no, you make a term in your agreement. I think you would make the commission amount a term in your agreement. We're going to. How else are we gonna do it?
With commercial brokers,
There was a time
they
where
do that today. So commercial has existed for many, many years without NAR. They're not members of NAR except if they're a franchise like us that is. So commercial brokers write in their co-op commission into the offer.
Mhm.
So they call and say, what are you expecting to pay, if any? And then they write an offer that says buyer's agent to be paid X at closing.
To address what Chris said, I believe there was, and I've looked for it recently, I haven't been able to find it there, but there was a term in the code of ethics that you were not supposed to make commissions part of your transaction, right? Like it wasn't part of your transactional documents. But I just think that this ruling blows that out of the water.
Can it just be a separate addendum prior to the offer being written that you have to?
Yeah, but that's a great idea, but like in the
Time is of the essence.
time is of the essence, right? Well, you're trying to get that thing signed by the seller, somebody else might be showing the property, right? When it comes to a code of ethics violation, we all are members of the NAR. We would all have to face those individually, but I'm just telling you, I don't think anybody's gonna bring that against you at this point. And I don't think
you're gonna
any-
see NAR changes by the end of the year.
Yeah,
That's what I think.
I
They'll
think so
roll
too.
out their new concept, their modifications to the.
Like seller, agrees to pay buyers.
Yeah,
does
And
X amount.
it could be that. There's also a seller fee agreement. There's an OREF seller fee agreement. I'd have to read it specifically to see how it applies to a situation like that. But basically it says that you don't represent the seller, but they're going to pay you a commission.
I've used those on Vistas.
Yeah.
Yeah, simpler the better.
Yeah. Okay, let's jump into a little presentation I put together for the BAC. So I went through both the OREF and the Oregon Realtors buyer representation agreements. We've got some copies here. So if you want to take some notes or just follow along, go for it. But we're not gonna go exactly line through line, but I'm gonna bring out some of the things that may not be so intuitive. Okay. So let's start with the OREF. Oh, I'll just wait till these get handed out. Now both these forms are good. They both have attributes I like. I think one is more marketable than the other, and we'll get through that as we go.
Question before we begin.
Yeah,
If we happen to use one or the other, but the purchase paperwork is the other.
I think they transfer.
They transfer.
Yeah, yeah,
There we go. Thank
yeah.
you.
I think it's one of the few forms that plays well with either sale agreement.
Plays at the same.
Because this is separate from the sale agreement, right? This is not part of the sale agreement. This is a contract between you and a buyer. All right. And when are we going to be presenting this? I think it depends on who the client is, right? But like, if you get a phone call from somebody you don't know and wants to see a house, you're probably going to run and show it to them. But before you show them too many houses, you're probably going to want to have this conversation, right? So be thinking about what that conversation looks like. And I think that's why going to that PMAR thing, like logging in that PMAR thing on tomorrow is probably a good thing. Anyways, okay. Okay, so the first part here is section 2, and it deals with what the term of this agreement is. So how long does this agreement last? Studies have shown that buyer takes from the time they are ready to purchase, like the time they start thinking about purchasing, the time they close is 180 days. That may be longer now because of lack of inventory and with changes in rates, right? So think about that. Other things to think about, like how far along is a buyer in the process? Have they been pre-approved? Have they been looking at houses? Something to consider. Do we need to start with a brief period of time to show your value to the buyer? Maybe. Have you already proven yourself to the buyer? Well, if you have, if this is somebody who's already done business with you, then you probably would be able to get a longer agreement than you would be somebody you've never met before. Okay. Is this agreement for just one specific property, or is it for a bunch of properties? Or is it for a genre of properties? Okay. How abundant or scarce is the property the client is looking for, right? If it's really abundant, you might get away with a shorter term. If it's something that's hard to find, then you're going to want to have more time to find it. Okay. And are they interviewing other brokers? Now, like, I know we all want to build our value, but like, it's a market condition, right? If they're talking to 3 brokers, you'll have to do that computation in your head. How bad do I want to work with this person? Okay. Any questions on this? All right. In this, it also addresses a termination and a termination fee that may be compelling as a way to maintain a relationship with your buyer client. Okay, so if they terminate it, they have to pay you. There's another option where they can just terminate it with written notice. Well, what are the problems with that? Hey, thanks for showing us this property. We're going to write an offer on it with the listing agent. Bye. In writing, right? Okay. But there is a caveat later down in the agreement where this may be a viable term for you, and we'll talk about that as we get there. Okay, so don't throw away that option yet. Okay. So this section here, we had kind of identified. Yeah. Oh yeah, go ahead.
What is our mechanism to terminate? Sorry.
Yeah, no, great question.
Let's say clients.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, this is something I agree with you. Great question. And you know, it's not stipulated in this agreement in any way. I would say written notice. There's just like in the listing agreement, there's no mention of a mechanism for you as a representative to terminate your client relationship. Because I think, because the relationship is for your benefit, this is I think from a legal perspective, the relationship is for your benefit. And so you're able to terminate it whenever you want. And I think you just do it in writing.
Check both those boxes?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Well, if you write down below, I mean, I think that there's a space below to fill that in. So yeah, you can terminate any time with a fee, but it's essentially the same thing as
$5 million.
yeah,
Mhm.
right.
I don't put the real terminated complaint. You check both boxes and then wrote a fee if they terminate.
Right. And this is only written from the perspective of the buyer terminating the relationship. Right.
But either party would put the real too.
But it does say without any further obligation, so then I don't think you can then add a fee,
Oh, right, yeah.
right?
Mhm. Okay. Any more questions
But
on
if
this
you-
one? Yeah.
If you check 19, that just says if the client terminates, that doesn't mean
It
that,
doesn't
that
address-
I can't terminate it.
No, it doesn't mean
Because I
that.
could just terminate
Right.
writing,
Right.
I owe you nothing.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
but if you terminate,
I had a discussion with an attorney about this one time, and her idea was about terminating relationships with clients is you can't leave them in a worse position. So you can't like you can't put them in a bad place and then bail because you screwed up, right?
mhm.
Right. You can't leave them in a worse place than you found them. Right. So you can't give them a bunch of bad advice and then when they won't take it, bail. I think that's kind of what she said. I don't know. It was Lane said this a while ago.
Well, I mean, it's easy if they haven't found a house,
Yeah. Right.
right?
Yeah.
So you just say, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
This isn't working out. Yeah. Okay. And again, this is the first time, by the way, this is the first time I've ever read either of these agreements all the way through. And for a dork like me who leads contracts, it's saying something, right? Okay. So bring your questions and like, I'm really giving thoughts to these as we go. Okay. So in section 4, you're going to identify the type of property your client is looking for. And I will implore you, be broad as you can, and also needs to be sort of specific so that you have something that's enforceable. So you can't just say, well, let me get through this here. So, like for the location, don't write a property in the state of Oregon. That's probably too broad to be enforceable, right? But don't be so specific to say like a property in the city of Tualatin. Well, what if the buyer's wanting to purchase a house in Tualatin because they want their kids to go to Tualatin High School, but they end up in Bull Mountain, which is in Tigard or in Durham, or they buy a property that's not in the city of Tualatin, it's in the unincorporated part of Tualatin. You could have written your way out of receiving a commission. So don't be too specific either. Got to find a happy medium.
Yeah, and another,
Acceptable?
Well,
probably.
Oh, hold on.
Well, the other thing is if they're looking for residential, we're gonna enter a market where there won't be a lot of residential. And so I would be putting vacant land because you might sell them a lot for a pre-sale.
Well,
That will start to happen as the number of homes dwindles
mhm.
Sure.
and they land in a development somewhere and they decide the only way we're gonna get a home that we want is to build. So
Yeah.
I would have both those.
Well, and it also says up there, it says select all that apply, right? So you're not mandated to select them. And by the buyer signing this, they're agreeing to what applies and what doesn't apply.
Income, does that mean investment?
Mhm. So here's some examples of things you could write. So a property within the greater Portland metropolitan area, a property within 100 miles of Portland, a property. That's right. Yes, a property like in Clackamas, Multnomah, Washington, or Yamhill counties, a property located in Oregon, the Oregon coast, up to 50 miles inland from the Pacific Ocean. So things like that apply. Yeah.
if you're working with a client in Oregon and Washington, you have to have a form.
Yeah, you have to. I would have both.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And in Washington, those who are licensed in Washington, you're going to have one of these to close the transaction and get paid starting January 1st, 2024. Okay.
Yeah, the other thing I would throw out, and I don't know how many of you will run into this, but I've run into it where I have represented someone and we end up buying a lot and they're going to do a pre-sale with the builder who I set up with them, or it's a builder that owns the neighborhood and he wants them to close the lot first. And then the argument becomes, well, did you deserve a commission on the house? right? We're paying you on the lot. Did you deserve a commission on the house that the builder's going to build? And so it might be also prudent to say vacant land and or if the purchaser acquires new construction, then it would be on the total value of the project. Something along those lines, right? So there's an expectation that if they buy a house and they close the lot, the developer pays a commission on the lot, which gives you at least part of your commission up front. You apply that amount to the total package, and then you earn a commission on the total purchase. You'll run into that probably in the next 3 years, I promise. But there aren't many that you'll run into in your life. But once you do, you'll be like really upset that you didn't think it through.
What's the value between you and your client of this section? What's the value of this section? Right. You have to have a conversation about it, right?
Yeah.
Like a really good conversation for you to be able to fill this out properly. So
I would suggest that the only way you fill these out is sitting down across the table.
absolutely.
Buyer broker.
Yeah, I wouldn't have like a something that I write on every one of these because you could find a buyer that's a savvy buyer that's like who's using these saying, well, no, you can't represent me in all of these areas. Like I want you to represent me in this specific area. Then that's a conversation you guys can have to figure out what that means and like what the implications of that are, right? Yeah, Peter.
It started with the fact when somebody called and said, can you show me a home? You go, absolutely. Let's meet at my office first.
Or coffee. I've been at a coffee shop and just talked to someone about what they want, where this would fit in nicely in the conversation.
Yeah.
You don't walk off, we're gonna show them the house without one of these signs.
Yeah, but it could maybe you know the house and you know they're not going to buy it too. Like, I mean, I think that when you start rule of thumbing this, you're going to lose opportunities, right? So you've just got to always look at the situation and say, okay, well, I can get away with showing them this house because they're not going to buy it because it's a dump.
But then I think you're missing the opportunity to sell your value. When someone calls me and shows, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Come to the office, sit down, and let's determine whether I want to work with you.
Yeah, and I think you're right, depending on your relationship that you already have with the client. But if someone just called you up off the phone out of nowhere and says, show me this house, they're not gonna, you can let somebody else show it to them.
We're not red fit.
Well, we're not, but I'm just saying, like, I've seen enough classes on converting leads on buyers that if you don't show them a house, if you don't show up when you don't know them, they're not going to work with you. They're going to say,
Yeah.
It's like saying, well, are you pre-qualified? Not yet. Well, call me when you're pre-qualified. They call somebody who will show them the house, right? And like, so we're going to have to figure this out, guys. Like, I don't know. Peter's probably right and I'm probably right. Every situation is going to be a little bit different. We're going to have to start thinking and being good business people.
In that situation, I would go show them the house. After I showed them the house, I'd say, hey, do you want to grab a cup of coffee? And then you could have this like in your bag or grab a cup of coffee and talk about more in depth what they want.
Right. And are people going to take advantage of this? 100%.
Yeah, I think saying no is.
I always had a strategy that if someone called me to see a house and I didn't know who it was, not a past client, nothing, then at that first showing, I always tried to show my value and understanding a home. So I would point things out that I knew they weren't looking at. Like sometimes people don't notice that there's 9-foot ceilings on the second floor. Sometimes people don't realize what's behind the house. They're looking at the backyard. They're looking at the size of the patio and they don't realize that there's, an apartment, 20-unit apartment building right behind it. And so whether they wanted the house or not, I wanted to make an impact so that they had to use me by pointing out all the things that I knew they weren't seeing or taking the time to look at. And that way I would solidify my value and that they needed me to actually make sure that they had they would end up in the right package. So to your point, whether I knew them or not, whether the commission was, I didn't really care what the commission was. I would just want to pick up a client. And the way to do it is to impress them with your knowledge.
I mean, in an ideal world, guys, the buyer won't be calling you to show them a house. The buyer will be calling you because they heard that you do a really good job at this and they want you to represent them in purchasing the house, just like a listing agent does, just like a seller does with a listing agent, right? In an ideal world, that's where this goes, right? This is a conversation you're having before they even thought about looking for a house, right? And I hope we get there.
So Cameron popped in. I was gonna ask you for commercial. How do you know what you're gonna get paid when you have someone that's interested in a property, or you find a property you might show a client to? How do you know what you're gonna get paid?
Are we talking about listings?
I'm talking about,
Buy side or sell
you
side?
have a buyer and there's a few listings that you want to show to the buyer. And you don't have a buyer's contract, or do you have a buyer's contract that says what you're going to get paid, what your minimum amount is that you're going to get paid? Like, how do you do it in the commercial world?
We've had in commercial engagement with the broker on the sell side as early of a time as possible is always the thing that works out the best for us on the buy side.
Yeah.
And we've had members of our commercial team run into that in the last month of issues where we waited a little too long. And in knowing if you engage with the broker on the sell side, they have to tell you what they're getting paid, and then you can negotiate it up front, especially if you're a great buyer or tenant for us.
So if somebody says to you, hey, if you're about ready to show 3 commercial properties, and so you're lining up to tour, and you call each one of them and you say, hey, look, what's your seller prepared to pay for a co-op fee? And they say they're not, then what's the conversation you have with them?
I haven't had that ever.
So they're all
That would
prepared,
be a tough conversation.
they're all prepared to pay to get their property sold, right? So that's the reality of where the market's going. We might have a few people that say, my inventory is so cool, I don't have to pay anyone else to help me. I will find someone. And you might see a few of those in the next few years, but the reality is the majority of people will be saying to themselves, how am I going to get the highest price? How am I going to?
Still by owners have always been an option. Right.
Correct. Yeah.
But the majority of people don't do that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the bottom line is you call every person. You get it in writing?
I haven't until these conversations that we've been having, but it might be a little different in commercial, but
Yeah.
I always try and show the value first, and then my idea is with all these conversations happening that I have some sort of buyer agreement that I can work with them on.
Mhm.
The tough part is, like, I always want to have an out for them in the agreement, and then in the commercial world, we have like a certain amount of time, like if they end up, so if they fire me with 1 week notice, and then they ended up signing a lease on the property, that's included in our contract, so like they just can't, it's kind of like if you get fired from
Yeah.
a company, you have, you can't work within that and be a competitor.
Yeah.
For a certain amount of time, it kind of functions as the same thing.
And one of these forms has a built-in term like that, the other doesn't. We'll get to that as we get going. Cool. All right. Okay, with regards to price, don't be so narrow on price, right? 675 to 700. Well, what if they get a seller financing at 5.5 that allows them to buy a house that's 800, right? Or what if you do a great job of negotiating and 675 turns into 665, or there are repairs and you max out the credit and you drop the purchase price and all of a sudden you're not getting a commission, or you could be in jeopardy of getting a commission. So don't be so narrow on a price range. I was just spitballing this 25% above their range, 25% below. Maybe it's wider. I don't know. I mean, I think that you probably have some latitude here.
I don't even know if I'd want to do that. So tell me why I even have to put that in.
Just thinking of something, if I don't know how these are going to be judged on what is going to be enforceable and what's not.
I mean, I like the idea of saying a property in the greater Portland area, right? I might sell them land. I might sell them a lot. I might sell them a house. I might end up selling them a rental that they see along the way in the process. Like, oh my God, I'm going to buy this as a rental. We're not going to move into it, right? There's so many ways this can work out.
But
I wouldn't put price point.
Is Newburgh the greater Portland area?
Yeah,
Is it?
I would say.
Is
You
it?
say a property within 100 miles of Portland, Oregon, pretty well covered.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I mean, like you have to have something. Like I wouldn't want something that someone later is going to argue with me that like Canby is not the greater Portland area.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's on the other
Someone
side of the
probably
planet.
argue
Yeah,
Canby and
right.
Newburgh.
Right. Well, this is the question. So I don't want to come at you guys with these definitive things saying this is how it's going to be and this is how it's going to be judged, because nobody knows. These forms aren't used enough for there to be any empirical like understanding of what's going to be enforceable, what's not going to be enforceable. We're going to be doing this as we go, guys. I'm not trying to scare you, but like I'm not going to sit here and tell you you're going to be safe by saying that, because I don't know. I really don't know.
I do have a plan.
Yeah.
Next position, like the next would be where
So would you go 400 to 2 million? I don't know, right?
Or you wouldn't even say price, you would
Maybe
just
you
say
say
a
blind.
property,
Yeah. Yeah.
a property located within,
Yeah.
50 miles of Portland or something.
Yeah. I'd probably
The city.
err on the side of vagarity. Is that a word? Vagarity?
Yeah. Or,
Vagarity.
or vagueness.
Vagueness. Well, I like wise whenever I can get it.
Vagarity.
I like it why whenever I can use it. Okay. Section 4 again. Terms, special features. Do not avoid filling out terms or special features. Terms can change. Special features can change. Like they can change their mind on what they want really easily. So just avoid putting anything in these spots at all costs. Okay, section 5 talks about some of your duties in the OREF form. You're basically, it doesn't state it, but you're basically bound by the by the Oregon agency disclosures, by Oregon agency law, and always the code of ethics. Okay, to some degree for now. Okay, section 6 talks about compensation. Okay, so again, this goes right on terms with the length of time that you're going to be offering. It's another thing that you're going to have to consider, right? So how much are the listings being offered? Like look for comps, look for the properties that they want to buy. What are they offering? Like, should that be part of your analysis? Maybe, right? What kind of relationship do you have with the client? Like, have you proven your worth to them already? Then you probably get to charge more. If you haven't, you may not be able to charge more. I don't know, right? How difficult is it to find a property? Is it something that's readily available? Or are you gonna be working with these people for 3 years trying to find a 1,200 square foot house on the lake? How complicated will the transaction be once you get into it, right? Like it's a commercial deal and you're gonna be working on it for 3 years. You're probably not gonna wanna get a little tiny fee. But if they've already identified the property and all you're doing is pushing paperwork, maybe you do it for a lower fee. Yeah.
Is there any risk if you have an agreement like this, and let's say, just for sake of argument, let's say you agree to 2%.
Mhm.
And then you get into contract with a listing that has 2.5 BAC.
It's still within the agreement. You get the higher amount.
Do you risk that 0.5%?
No.
Not getting.
No.
Okay.
If said fee is greater than client's
Get
obligation,
it.
the agent shall be entitled to the additional amount,
Mhm.
plus any non-refundable fee.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I've been using this REF one for about 18 months, like
Mhm.
every buyer has one, and I update it, I just put them on a tickler.
Mhm.
And I always put 2%, knowing that it's more likely gonna be 2.5.
Mhm. Yeah,
Because instead of going like 3 and then trying to claw back
right.
from them or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Look, there's a lot of different strategies on this, and I'm not going to say anybody's right or wrong on it.
Yeah.
That's at this point. So that I see where that makes it makes a lot of sense. And what the market we're in today, that makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, so there is a section on this where you're able to charge a fee up front, and we're not there today. If you guys could get a fee up front now, my gosh, you are a great salesperson. That's amazing, right? But like, don't forget your value, guys. Okay. Like for most people, you are going to be representing them in the single most expensive transaction that they're ever going to do until they buy another house with you, hopefully. Right. And so why do attorneys charge retainers? Because they want to make sure they're going to get paid for their work. Like,
most part, it goes into the client trust, right? They can't get until.
okay, well,
So, you know,
maybe that's a little bit different, right? Yeah, maybe that's different. But I guess my point is, like, I think somebody eventually will get to this point. It may not be anybody in this room, but somebody's going to get to this point someday. I think. I hope it would be great. Like, I think we're all worth
We
it.
all have clients. Adds a whole lot.
Yeah, right. But I really do believe, guys, like what we do is important. Okay. And I'm not saying go out and ask for this tomorrow, right? But like, this would be a reason why you wouldn't ask for a cancellation fee. It's because you charged a fee up front. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. Let's get into the Oregon Realtor one real quick. Sorry, we're going to go a little bit over. I apologize, guys. All right. So this form is a little bit different. I think this form is a little bit more aggressive. And I don't know if that's good or bad. If it were me, I would probably take the Oregon form, the OREF form, and use the additional provisions to create a couple terms that I like off this one per the situation, but let's go through it. Okay. So, just like the OREF agreement, you will, want to apply, this is on the purpose and the identifying the property, give just enough detail to make it enforceable, but not so much detail that you write yourself out of getting paid on a transaction. Okay. So that's what section 2 is. It identifies the kind of property they're looking for. The Oregon Realtor form establishes that buyer has not entered into any other buyer representation agreement. It would be implied in the OREF form. So it's expressly stated here. That's probably a better thing. The Oregon forms go into more detail regarding the duties of the buyer and the buyer broker, which could be a good thing or could not be a good thing. I like the buyer side of it. I don't know if I like the broker side as much. So this form provides for an automatic extension. This is what Cameron was talking about. So provides for an automatic extension. Well, this begins talking about it. If you go into contract on a property, but your term would expire prior to the closing date, this automatically extends it to cover that period of time for which the closing would happen. So if you have a 6-month term, but the property closes 6 months and a week later, this would ensure that you got paid on it per the terms of this agreement. Okay. Well, I think that's a good term.
We can always add this into the other.
Exactly. Right. If I was, when OREF crafted this agreement, nobody was thinking about this stuff. They didn't probably pay much attention to it, but Oregon Realtors had the benefit of knowing they're getting sued when they drew this up.
You just have a purchase agreement that's signed that goes beyond your date on delivery. That would supersede it automatically.
This document supersedes any sale agreement. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay. So here we talk about, so Section 8 establishes an early term fee. It also adds terms stating that the buyer becomes aware of a property as set forth in the Section 7. The buyer would owe the buyer broker a full compensation amount. So if they terminated early, they'd pay you. But if they purchased the property that met their description of what they wanted within the term that was originally noted, they'd have to pay you the full amount that was already stipulated before. Does that make sense? So they can terminate and pay you and not buy a house that they found that you brought to them, or they found while they were working with you. But if they buy that house after they terminated, but before the expiration of the contract, then they would owe you the full commission amount that you had negotiated when the document was signed. Good question. Right.
You will.
Yeah. So you'll see, I
Like with
showed that house. You just watch list every house you ever showed them. And then when it closes, you'll look to see who bought it. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, I showed that to them. And then you say, hey, pay me.
I've had to do that before. I mean, it doesn't happen very often, but I remember I had to go back and check the recording to see who the buyer was, because I thought that an owner, when I had a listing expire, I thought the owner sold it to someone I had showed it to. And there was no way I could figure it out until it closed. And I went back and looked at the deed. And then I literally went up to the door 2 weeks later, and my client was in the house. And I said to the seller then, hey, you sold it to the people, and here's the way the contract worked. And they all knew, they were all intentionally doing it. So
Yeah.
Who did you said that to the seller or the buyer?
I said it to the buyer in the new home because I had shown the home to the buyer and I knew the buyer.
Yeah.
And then I went back and I sent a letter to the seller. I wanted to confirm they were actually in the house, because I knew what the deed said, but I wanted to make sure. And then I went back to the seller and said, hey, guys.
You had the buyer broker in place and not.
No, this one was for a listing. So I had it listing, it expired. I knew someone wanted to make an offer on the house. They'd met the owner at the house because they were driving by, had a long conversation. The listing was in 3 weeks or 2 weeks of expiring. The buyer decided not to make an offer. I thought it was weird. And so when it expired, the seller did not relist with me. And I thought they're going to sell it to my clients that I had shown the house to. And the only way the question was, how do you prove it? I actually looked at the deed a few weeks later. I kept track of the house.
Mhm.
I know the seller moved out. I looked at the deed, realized it was the people that I had shown the home to. There was language in the listing that said if it's a client you procured within 120 days, that I met those requirements.
Yeah.
And I got paid.
Yeah. Good.
So you keep track. At the end of the day, you'll have a feeling.
Right. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but section 2 there, it adds a period of time after the expiration of the contract to where you would get paid should the buyer purchase a property that you showed them. So this would go beyond the contracted period. And this is where it may get a little hard to get signed, because what if they're unhappy working with you? Or let's say a buyer calls you guys up and says, hey, I've terminated my buyer broker agreement. I've heard great things about you. Would you please show me will you show me some property? You'd be like, yeah, I would love to work with you. You get them signed up in a buyer broker agreement. You've done a fantastic job, and you show them a house and you get them in contract on a house that they'd already tried to write on with the other agent, but they couldn't get it locked up for some reason because they weren't any good at it or whatever. And now that buyer would be on the hook to pay two separate commissions because they signed this term right here. Right. So this is where I'm not sure if this is a term that you'll be able to get signed a lot. Anybody who has any foresight probably wouldn't sign that, I don't think.
Probably what you'd end up doing is you would just agree with that previous agent just to pay them a referral fee and
Well-
both parties walk away.
So in the RMLS listing agreement, there is a term like this that says after a certain amount of time, if the buyer comes back and buys it, I get paid. But there's a caveat to it that says unless you've listed with somebody else, right? And that's probably what this would need, I'm guessing. Anyways, okay. Let's see, we go to deal with that. Okay, so in both agreements, you're directed to go to mediation arbitration should there be any dispute about money. Except for this one adds a component for small claims court as well. Our commission amounts now are very rarely qualified for small claims court. But what if it was over a difference in a commission? Maybe that would be a beneficial term for you, because it's getting in and out of small claims court is a lot easier than getting in and out of arbitration. And arbitration is going to cost each party about $20,000 to $25,000 at a minimum. If you get to that point to settle, the winner, the prevailing party, is due attorney fees. So if you lose or if you win, it's going to cost somebody $50,000, $40,000, right? On top of the commission amount, right? So disputes over this are a big deal. Like you're going to be talking about on $1 million house. Let's say you've signed this thing up at 3%. That's a $30,000 commission. And then you've got to argue about it. There's $20,000 aside to get through arbitration. It turns out to be $100,000 really fast. So
small claims court may be your friend.
Could be your friend. So that could be a beneficial part of this. You may want to add that term or just use the form. I don't care which one you use, but just use one.
This one looks like it has more teeth.
It has more teeth. Yeah. It's more thought. It's got more, it's got a lot more foresight. Any questions about either of these forms? Question for you. Do you think using these will make you better at what you do? Do you think it makes it better for the buyer?
Yes,
Better for the seller?
professional impression.
Better for the industry?
Yes.
If inventory stays low, you're going to have to start treating buyers like you would listings, right? You want to be guaranteed you're going to get paid just like you would with
Good
the
point.
listing. And so they're going to be, you might not have any inventory. You might have one home, you might have two homes. It's not a full-time job to manage one or two listings. So treat every buyer like their future income. Get them under a contract and go out and find them a home.
In times of low listing inventory, there's downward pressure on BAC. There has been in the past. When there's high volume, high listing, we see BACs go up.
They go up. Yeah.
Look what happened in 2008, 2009, especially for bank-owned listings, 3%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Laura.
Stupid.
Fire for everybody that are spitting things out right now. We might have had our contract with them 6 months ago, 9 months ago, even a year ago,
Mhm.
and they haven't bought, we didn't have this in place. So what do you think the script is now to get them to the table to review this with us?
Yeah.
You know, they've
Yeah.
already been working with us.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a really good question. I think, I don't know. I personally, I think I would start with the lawsuit.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Like I would open the conversation with a lawsuit and say, because of this, we're doing this.
I've already had a couple of my favorite clients text me to ask me what that means to my business. So I would start with that. I would just say, hey, since the last time I worked with you, have you followed that NAR was in a lawsuit that they lost? And what's come out of that is that we have to separate our business. So we have to talk in terms of compensation from our buyers and compensation from our listing agents, listing sellers, right? And so to that end, going forward, I need to have a conversation with you about using a buyer's agent contract and what it means to you in terms of representation, our fiduciary duties to you, the activities that we're going to do for you. That's what I would have. And if it was a client that knows me, they would come in and have that conversation for sure.
And what's been so hard about using these forms has been the fact there's been somebody willing to do business without it. Right. But I think that's changed. I think that's going to change. I think every real estate office, every office that's having a meeting right now is probably talking about this in some way or another. Like when we were on that NAR, that Oregon Realtors meeting 2 weeks ago, they said buyer broker agreement like 30 or 40 times. I've got a broker risk management meeting coming up on Thursday. It's probably going to be the main topic of those meetings. Like everybody's gonna be talking about it. Every PB in town is going to be promoting these. Everybody's going to be pushing these. It's going to make your job to get the signed, your ability to get the signed a lot easier because everybody's going to be talking about it. It's going to be the norm, right? Yeah. And it's great because buyers are going to have to think about who they're working with. They're gonna be like, wait a minute, like, are you worthy of my signature? You all are. You all are.
You will have to demonstrate your value. That's why I said when I showed a property, I wanted to make sure that I pointed out the size of the trim, the type of doors, interior doors, the crown molding, the recessed, the clear story windows, the type of cabinets, the type of millimeter or wood finish on the interior of the cabinet. So Lazy Susans. Like I would go around and make sure they saw everything. And then I would talk about the curb appeal. Did you notice the house down the street has a motorhome parked in the driveway? We'd want to read the CC&Rs before we ever decided whether we wanted to buy here, right? Those are the things that you do. And then they're like, oh my God, I need representation because I didn't think of any of those things.
And the first time Dwight shows a house to somebody he doesn't know, he shows up early to figure out what the house is first. So he has some value when he walk around.
That's right.
Yep.
Right.
Cool. Okay, so like I know these all make us uncomfortable because we've never used them before. We never wanted to use them before. We never wanted to have those conversations. We just wanted to get on to start showing houses and show our value, and we just show them a house and we eventually sell them a house. But like this is going to improve this industry so much. This is going to show you're going to be able to, you're going to get good at this. You're going to get used to this. And Pam?
This is good information. I'm wondering if you might do a role play, like I'm sure that would be beneficial for you.
Totally. We've been thinking about that. Well, one of the things we wanted to do is like maybe more of instead of like more of a role play, like a mastermind. Let's just all get together in a room and just crowdsource how we're going to do this. Like what's that? Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I think we've already been talking about that.
Yeah, we are going to do that for sure.
And we want to find people who are using it.
We just want to go over the
level.
technical things before we start getting into how you mastermind because no one will understand the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's that, Peter?
I said, I think I'm scheduled first part of December.
Yeah.
To have one, yeah.
Yeah.
One thought I, Lindy, when we sit down and talk to the buyer, one of the first questions we ask after find out pre-qualified, we're in a meeting, is to ask them if they know anybody that's ever sold a house, like your folks. And the answer is yes. Well, when they did that, did they sign a listing agreement? Do you know why? Establish a fiduciary relationship, whatever. We're here to offer you that same capability. So, and this is the form we use. If you're scared of it going in, like anything else in life, it's going to show.
Yeah.
This is how a professional in my opinion, does business. You don't find an attorney that doesn't have and gives you all the advice, and then lets you walk out the door and say, gotta, we can have a second meeting, maybe you'll pay me. I don't think it works that way.
Mhm.
So in a sense, it's a mindset.
Mhm.
Chris, so I was gonna ask you, you've been a buyer's agent for 20 years, so, and I don't think we used buyer's agent agreements or other than maybe for a year or less than a year, right? So how did you convince people to stay with you until the end? What things did you make sure you did?
I think it was like you showing value, just making sure that you're giving them information that they can't get by Googling or whatever, that you're being proactive with showing them the knowledge that you have.
100%.
You just have to become invaluable. Excuse me.
Yeah, and that gets back to one of the things we've been talking about with the new agent coaching, and that is taking the time to go through at least 2 homes a week and looking at the differences between the homes, because it's going to be more important than ever when you have to convince a buyer to work with you. If you can't talk about the differences between a home when you walk into it from the last home or from homes they have seen in the past, you'll have your value proposition is going to have a big dent in it. And so the more you know your product, the greater your chance that someone will say, I want to sign up with you as my representative.
I was thinking about this, we all know Jenny Hill has a farm down in Billable. I don't know how many other people are farming, right? But let's say you've got a farm and you've got a list of properties that are in your pocket, like your pocket listings. Are you going to share those now with a buyer who won't sign a buyer broker agreement? Is that a piece of value that you can offer somebody who's a buyer? Like your knowledge of a specific area or your insight into what's coming up on the market or what's available that's secretive, like, right? That's a huge way to get people to, you could probably get people to pay a fee. Like, yeah, I will show you all my stuff, but I'm going to need a deposit.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not there yet, but yeah, I see it happening. I could see it happening. So, and you guys seem crazy, but I really think it could happen. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Keep up the good work, guys. You guys are awesome.
Yeah.